The pregnancy test trembled in my hand as I stood in the bright morning sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, my heart overflowing with joy after years of heartbreak and desperate prayers. I had imagined hundreds of ways to tell my husband the wonderful news. I thought he would smile, lift me into his arms, and tell me our family was finally complete. Instead, before I could even speak, I watched him walk through our front door carrying an infant wrapped in a pale blue blanket. His face showed no excitement, no confusion, no happiness, only a cold determination that froze every hopeful dream inside me. Then he looked directly into my eyes and calmly announced that he had legally adopted another woman's baby. Before I could even process what he had said, he uttered words that shattered my soul forever. He wanted me to abort our own child because, according to him, this baby mattered more. Before this heartbreaking journey begins, if you believe kindness is stronger than cruelty, forgiveness is more powerful than revenge, and hope can survive even the darkest betrayal, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps our community continue sharing emotional stories that remind us no storm lasts forever. My name is Meredith Holloway, and until that unforgettable morning, I believed I was living an ordinary but happy life. I had spent 11 years married to Grant Holloway, a successful financial consultant whose calm personality made everyone believe he was dependable. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood surrounded by maple trees and carefully maintained gardens where children rode bicycles every afternoon and neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect couple. Friends admired our home, our routines, and our partnership. No one knew how many tears had been hidden behind those polished walls. For nearly a decade, we struggled to have children. We endured countless medical appointments, invasive procedures, heartbreaking miscarriages, and endless moments of disappointment. Every failed pregnancy stole another piece of my confidence. Still, I never blamed Grant. I believed we were carrying the burden together. Whenever I cried, he held my hand. Whenever another treatment failed, he assured me that our family would grow someday. Those memories would later become the cruelest lies I had ever believed. The morning I discovered I was finally pregnant, sunlight flooded every room of our house. Birds chirped outside while gentle summer breezes carried the scent of blooming roses through the open kitchen window. Everything felt symbolic, as though the world itself was celebrating our miracle. I smiled at my reflection, placed both hands over my stomach, and whispered promises to the tiny life growing inside me. I spent hours planning a beautiful surprise. I baked Grant's favorite cinnamon coffee cake and wrapped the pregnancy test inside a tiny white gift box tied with a soft blue ribbon. I imagined his face lighting up with happiness. I imagined us crying together and calling our parents. I imagined decorating a nursery filled with laughter instead of silence. At exactly 11 o'clock, I heard his car enter the driveway. Excitement rushed through me. Then I noticed another vehicle following behind him. It was unfamiliar. A woman stepped out. She was elegantly dressed despite looking exhausted. In her arms rested a sleeping infant only a few months old. Grant walked toward her instead of toward our front door. They stood together beneath the large oak tree in our front yard. Although I couldn't hear every word, I saw him gently touch the baby's tiny hand. My heartbeat slowed. Confusion replaced excitement. The woman handed him a folder filled with legal documents before quietly walking back to her vehicle without ever looking toward the house. Grant carried the baby inside. I forced myself to smile despite the growing fear tightening around my chest. I asked if everything was all right. Instead of answering, he placed the sleeping infant carefully into the bassinet he had somehow already assembled in our living room. A bassinet. Inside my home. One I had never seen before. He finally looked at me. His expression contained no guilt. Only certainty. He explained that the child's mother had passed away after complications following childbirth and that before her death she had entrusted him with ensuring the baby had a loving future. According to him, legal arrangements had already been completed over the previous several weeks. Several weeks. While I had been celebrating every hopeful sign of pregnancy, my husband had secretly been arranging to adopt another woman's child. I struggled to understand why he had hidden something so enormous. Then I asked the question that changed everything. Who was the baby's mother? Grant hesitated only briefly before answering. She had been his mistress for nearly 3 years. My knees weakened. The room seemed to tilt around me. Every photograph hanging on our walls suddenly looked fake. Every anniversary. Every vacation. Every promise. Every embrace. Every memory. All built upon deception. I stared silently at the sleeping infant who had done absolutely nothing wrong. The baby breathed peacefully, completely unaware that his arrival had destroyed another family. Tears filled my eyes, but they were not directed toward him. They were for the life I thought I had. For the marriage I thought was real. For the woman I used to be. My hands instinctively rested over my stomach. I realized my child had already become second place. Grant continued speaking as though discussing ordinary household finances. He explained that he had loved the baby's mother deeply but believed leaving me would have damaged his professional reputation during an important promotion. Remaining married had been more convenient. When she unexpectedly died, he decided the honorable thing was to raise their son himself. I whispered that I was pregnant. For one brief second, I expected surprise. Joy. Emotion. Anything. Instead, he sighed with visible frustration. He told me the timing couldn't have been worse. He said raising 2 babies would complicate everything. He calmly suggested ending my pregnancy because, in his words, they already had a child who needed them more. His explanation felt colder than winter. He argued that his adopted son had already lost one parent. Our unborn baby, he claimed, didn't yet have memories or feelings. According to him, it would be the logical decision. Logical. As though my child were an unwanted expense on a spreadsheet. I felt something inside me break forever. Without raising my voice, I walked upstairs. I entered the nursery we had slowly been preparing over the past several years after every hopeful attempt to become parents. Small painted clouds decorated one wall. A rocking chair waited quietly beside the window. Tiny stuffed animals sat untouched on empty shelves. I closed the door. Then I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not because another woman had existed. Not because my marriage had collapsed. But because the man I loved had looked at our unborn child and decided someone else's baby deserved life while ours deserved to disappear. Hours passed before I could stop shaking. When I finally returned downstairs, Grant was feeding the infant with remarkable tenderness. He smiled warmly at the baby. A smile I had not seen directed toward me in years. It was then I understood something terrifying. He wasn't confused. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't making an emotional mistake. He had already replaced us. Quietly. Completely. While I had been praying for our miracle, he had been building another family in secret. I gently picked up my purse, my medical records, and the tiny gift box that still contained the pregnancy test wrapped in its blue ribbon. Without saying another word, I walked into the bright afternoon sunshine, closed the front door behind me, and realized that the woman who had entered that house in the morning no longer existed. The woman who walked away was about to discover a strength she never knew she possessed. The warm afternoon sun felt almost cruel as I drove without knowing where I was going. Every familiar street reminded me of the life I believed I had built with Grant. The little cafe where we celebrated our anniversaries, the bookstore where he once surprised me with my favorite novel, the park where we dreamed aloud about pushing a stroller beneath golden autumn leaves, all of it suddenly felt like someone else's memories. I finally pulled into a quiet botanical garden where elderly couples walked hand in hand and young families laughed beneath colorful flower beds. I sat on a wooden bench with both hands resting protectively over my stomach. For the first time since leaving home, I allowed myself to breathe. No matter what happened next, one truth had become crystal clear. My baby had already been rejected by the one person who should have loved this child unconditionally. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. I called my obstetrician and asked whether she could see me that afternoon. Hearing the trembling in my voice, she rearranged her schedule immediately. During the examination, she smiled gently after listening to the baby's heartbeat. The steady rhythm echoed through the room like a promise that hope was still alive. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but this time they were mixed with gratitude. That tiny heartbeat reminded me that I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone depending on me completely. Whatever happened to my marriage, I had already become a mother. After the appointment, my doctor asked if everything was all right at home. I tried to pretend I was simply overwhelmed by pregnancy hormones, but the words refused to stay inside. I told her everything. I told her about the affair, the secret adoption, and the horrifying request that I end my pregnancy. She listened without interrupting, then looked directly into my eyes and quietly reminded me that emotional abuse often begins with convincing someone their feelings no longer matter. She encouraged me to protect both myself and my unborn child before making any decisions about my future. Instead of returning home, I checked into a small daytime wellness retreat on the edge of town where guests could spend the day resting, receiving counseling, and thinking clearly away from daily pressures. I turned off my phone for several hours. When I finally switched it back on, there were more than 40 missed calls from Grant. His messages sounded less like concern and more like frustration. He complained that the baby was crying constantly, that he needed diapers from the garage, that important paperwork was locked inside my office drawer, and that I needed to come home because people were beginning to ask questions. Not one message asked whether I was safe. Not one message asked about our baby. Not one message apologized. For the first time in 11 years, I didn't answer him. The following morning arrived bright and cloudless. I drove home only because I needed clothes and personal documents. As I quietly entered the house, I noticed bottles scattered across the kitchen counter and baby blankets covering the living room furniture. Grant looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and the confident businessman I had married appeared completely overwhelmed. Still, instead of apologizing, he immediately began explaining how difficult single parenting already felt. His words almost made me laugh. Single parenting. He had chosen this situation himself while expecting me to sacrifice my own child to make his life easier. I calmly packed a suitcase without responding. When he realized I intended to leave again, his attitude changed. He insisted we should think practically. He claimed divorce would damage both of our finances. He even suggested we could simply continue living together while raising only the adopted baby. According to him, everyone would eventually adjust. His proposal revealed something terrifying. He still believed I would accept being treated as though my child had no value. I quietly removed my wedding ring and placed it on the hallway table. The sound it made against the polished wood seemed louder than any argument could have been. As I carried my suitcase toward the front door, my eyes fell upon the infant sleeping peacefully inside the bassinet. He stretched his tiny fingers without opening his eyes. A wave of compassion washed over me. None of this was his fault. He hadn't asked to be born into betrayal. He hadn't chosen dishonest parents. He was simply an innocent child who deserved love. I gently tucked his blanket around his shoulders before walking away. Grant watched silently. Perhaps for the first time, he realized I wasn't angry with the baby. I was finished with him. Over the next several weeks, I rented a small apartment filled with sunlight and fresh flowers. It wasn't luxurious, but every room felt peaceful. I attended every prenatal appointment alone, slowly rebuilding the confidence that years of disappointment had stolen from me. My lawyer, a thoughtful woman named Celeste Rowan, patiently gathered financial records while uncovering something far more disturbing than I had imagined. Grant's affair had not lasted 3 years. It had lasted almost 6. He had secretly purchased another condominium using joint marital funds. He had paid thousands of dollars in gifts, vacations, medical expenses, and legal fees. Every anniversary gift he claimed he couldn't afford. Every excuse about working late. Every canceled holiday. Every financial sacrifice I believed we were making together. It had all funded another relationship. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements. Emails. Property records. insurance documents, even photographs. Each new discovery hurt, but strangely, every painful truth also made me stronger. Lies lose their power once they're exposed. Then one afternoon, Celeste uncovered something neither of us expected. The adoption paperwork contained irregularities. Grant had rushed the process using emergency legal provisions that required complete financial disclosure. Several important assets had been intentionally hidden. That omission could have serious legal consequences. Meanwhile, Grant began calling mutual friends, telling everyone I had abandoned him and his adopted son because I was jealous of an innocent baby. At first, many people believed him. I didn't defend myself publicly. I knew the truth didn't need to be shouted. Eventually, it would speak for itself. One sunny Saturday afternoon, several members of our neighborhood organized a family charity picnic supporting children who had lost parents. Ironically, Grant attended with the baby, hoping to strengthen his image as a devoted single father. He didn't expect me to be there. I had volunteered months earlier and decided not to withdraw simply because my marriage had ended. People stared awkwardly as we crossed paths. Grant attempted to smile for everyone watching. He approached me carrying the baby and quietly suggested that we pretend everything was fine until the event ended. I looked around at dozens of families donating toys, books, and school supplies to children in need. Then I calmly answered loud enough for nearby volunteers to hear. I said pretending had already stolen too many years of my life. The conversations around us stopped. Grant's smile disappeared. Without raising my voice, I explained only one simple fact. He had asked me to end my pregnancy because another woman's baby mattered more to him. Silence spread across the picnic grounds. Several people lowered their eyes. Others stared at Grant in complete disbelief. He tried denying it. Unfortunately for him, Celeste had advised me to record one of his earlier phone conversations. In that recording, his own voice repeated nearly the same words. The truth needed no dramatic performance. His own voice told the entire story. Within days, everything he had carefully protected began collapsing. His company's ethics committee launched an internal review after learning he had concealed major financial obligations and misused shared marital assets. Friends who once admired him quietly stepped away. Even relatives who had defended him could no longer ignore what he had done. For the first time in years, Grant experienced something unfamiliar. Consequences. But while his carefully built world began falling apart, another unexpected discovery was about to change my own future forever. The unexpected discovery arrived on a bright Monday morning just as sunlight poured through the windows of Celeste Rowan's office. I expected another update about the divorce, but the expression on her face told me something far more significant had happened. She slid a folder across the polished desk and explained that Grant's hidden financial records had uncovered several illegal transfers connected to the condominium he secretly purchased for his mistress. Because marital funds had been used without my knowledge or consent, the court had frozen those assets until the divorce was finalized. More importantly, the judge reviewing our case had already expressed serious concern about Grant's conduct toward me during my pregnancy. His own emails, financial records, and recorded statements painted a devastating picture of manipulation, deception, and emotional cruelty. For the first time since my world had fallen apart, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. Not because Grant was losing everything, but because the truth no longer depended on my words alone. It existed in documents, in records, in facts. No one could rewrite what had happened. As the weeks passed, my pregnancy continued beautifully. Every ultrasound became another reminder that life has an incredible way of growing even in broken places. I began attending prenatal classes by myself, expecting them to be lonely. Instead, I met remarkable women whose encouragement slowly rebuilt my confidence. One of them, Vivian Clark, had also survived betrayal years earlier while expecting her daughter. She often reminded me that motherhood begins with courage long before delivery. Her friendship became one of the greatest gifts I never expected to receive. The apartment gradually transformed into a peaceful home. Soft cream-colored curtains fluttered in the afternoon breeze. Tiny baby clothes filled the dresser. A rocking chair sat beside a large window overlooking a park where children laughed every afternoon. Every small detail reminded me that I wasn't building a perfect family anymore. I was building an honest one. Meanwhile, Grant's life continued unraveling. His employer terminated his contract after completing their internal investigation. Several longtime clients withdrew their business, unwilling to trust someone who had hidden financial misconduct. The luxurious condominium he had secretly purchased became part of the divorce settlement. Expensive cars disappeared. Investment accounts were frozen. The reputation he had spent years protecting collapsed far faster than he ever imagined. Yet through all of it, I never celebrated his downfall. Pain should never become entertainment. One sunny afternoon, nearly 2 months before my due date, Grant requested a meeting through our attorneys. We met in a public mediation office filled with natural light. He looked older than I remembered. The confidence that once defined him had vanished. His expensive tailored suits had been replaced by simple clothing, and exhaustion showed in every movement. He apologized. Not with dramatic speeches. Not with tears. Simply with quiet words. He admitted that years of selfish decisions had convinced him he could control everyone's lives without consequences. He confessed that he had convinced himself he was protecting his career, his image, and his future while destroying the people who loved him most. Most painfully, he admitted there was no excuse for asking me to end our pregnancy. He said those words haunted him every single day. I listened calmly. Then I thanked him for finally telling the truth. But forgiveness, I explained, could never mean pretending nothing had happened. Trust, once shattered so completely, could not simply be rebuilt because someone regretted breaking it. We finalized our divorce with mutual agreements regarding finances and future communication about legal matters only. There was no dramatic courtroom battle. Only quiet closure. Several weeks later, during another beautiful morning filled with warm sunshine, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The moment I heard her first cry, every painful memory seemed to lose its power. The nurse gently placed her into my arms. She opened her tiny eyes. Wrapped her impossibly small fingers around mine. And suddenly I understood something profound. The greatest revenge had never been making Grant lose everything. The greatest revenge was refusing to lose myself. I named her Eleanor Grace because both names reminded me of strength wrapped in kindness. Every difficult moment suddenly carried meaning. Every tear had led me here. Months passed. Life slowly found a beautiful rhythm. Each morning, Eleanor and I walked through the neighborhood park beneath bright blue skies. She laughed whenever birds landed nearby. Neighbors who once whispered about my divorce now greeted us warmly. Many later admitted they had believed Grant's version of events until the truth came out. Instead of holding resentment, I simply smiled. People sometimes believe the loudest voice before they discover the honest one. One afternoon, while volunteering at the same children's charity where my marriage had publicly unraveled, I noticed someone standing quietly near the donation table. It was Grant. He was holding the little boy he had adopted. The child looked healthy, happy, and deeply attached to him. Grant approached cautiously. He thanked me for something I never expected. He said that seeing the compassion I had shown toward an innocent child, even after everything he had done, had forced him to confront the kind of man he had become. He admitted that if I had treated the boy with hatred, he might have continued blaming everyone else for his failures. Instead, my kindness had removed every excuse. He promised he was trying every day to become the father that little boy deserved. For the first time, I believed him. Not because of his words. Because of the humility behind them. We would never be husband and wife again. But perhaps, in different ways, we had both become better people through unimaginable pain. As Eleanor grew, I filled our home with honesty instead of perfection. She would someday learn that families are not defined by appearances, expensive houses, or perfect photographs. They are built by love, respect, sacrifice, and truth. Those are the things no betrayal can ever steal. Years later, I looked back at the morning that had once seemed like the end of my life. It wasn't. It was the beginning of the life I was truly meant to live. If I had accepted Grant's demand, would have lost the greatest blessing I have ever known. Instead, I chose courage over fear, hope over despair, and love over bitterness. That choice changed everything. Before this story ends, I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done if someone asked you to sacrifice your own child for their selfish desires? Leave a meaningful comment below and share the lesson this story taught you. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Sometimes the people who break your heart unknowingly push you toward the life you were always meant to have. Betrayal can leave deep scars, but it can also uncover strength you never knew existed. In the end, kindness does not always change the person who hurt you, but it always changes the person who chooses to keep their heart open. And sometimes, that is the most beautiful victory of all.